sitting in that room with my new, partially dragon friend. I was barely able to keep my eyes open. I had burned so much energy fixing the queen, I had no idea what I was doing. Just like so many young guys, you just don't realize how much energy you're burning until you're about ready to go to sleep that night. You don't even make the bed. In fact, if it wasn't for the fact that the door kept opening without any warning or knocking, I definitely would have passed out right there. At one point, the butler came in and handed me my canteens. I opened one of them up and sipped the water just to make sure it was in fact water and they weren't slipping me a Mickey or anything like that. I simply put everything away, and thankfully, behind him, a few others came in. They seemed to walk kind of funny with those tiny little steps they took. Boy, this is something I'm going to have to get used to. With that, they showed up with different types of garbs, and they began to look over to Renizia and began to get her ready. They started to dress her in some funky-looking kimono thing. Seriously, how many layers are on this thing? I started to wonder if they understood what modern undergarments were, as I realized they didn't put any on, but I was so tired I could barely keep my eyes open. And as I started drifting away, I actually remember looking over and seeing that she was shy every time my eyes drifted in her direction. I can't say I blame her. I was more worried of what was going to happen. Then suddenly, a thought hit me like a brick in the nuts. And I jumped to my feet, ran over, and I grabbed my rifle, took it away from where it was out of reach of those ones dressing her. I suddenly realized that I left my weapon behind. Oh no, I'm not doing that twice. Suddenly I was alert and awake, moving around, grabbing the weapon, and maneuvering it so that my hand was on the pistol grip. It was exactly where it needed to be now. The women looked at me scared, like I was going to just shoot everybody. But that's just standard PTSD, man. Shell shock. It's a real bitch, I'll tell you. I went back over to their version of a sofa, which, if you could even call it that, and began to fade off again, but this time cradling my weapon as I used to, taking my hand and slowly wrapping it around the sling so that if someone tried to take it away from me, it would definitely pull on me. I couldn't keep my eyes open anymore as the adrenaline wore off. But, being a very light sleeper, I knew if anyone moved around, I'd be waking up. I woke up again as they finished up. As they had to alter her clothes, the ripping of fabric is oddly similar to the ripping of flesh. So, immediately, my eyes shot open. Thankfully, they were just making room for her wings. Okay, whatever. I drifted off again, as they began to examine her to make sure it fit correctly. They moved around, and I jerked awake again. What is going on? Okay, here's good. And then as they went to leave, even the slightest creak from the door, and my eyes shot open. With that, I saw them leave. I got up and moved something in front of the doors. I was tired of them just barging in like that. Then again, I suddenly realized this door slides. Ugh, so much for blocking the door. Whatever. I just left the little dresser right there, and I moved back over to those cushions and curled up where I was. I looked over. Renizia walked to me and was very, very subtle in her movements. She was very concerned. She seemed worried about me, which I appreciated, of course. But she then began to crawl up next to me. No, hold, whoa, stop. You see that over there? And I knife-handed over to the side. That's a bed. Go sleep in it. And as she got up, I drifted off again. This time, I let myself go, as much as I could, cradling my weapon in my arms. Off to sleep I went. Must have been a dreamless sleep, because the next thing I remember was me opening my eyes slightly as the first glimmer of light was coming in through the windows. I got up. I looked around. Renizia was still asleep. I looked over to see if she was doing okay. She had somehow kicked her covers off at night. I guess her kind isn't used to being so warm. Then again, she's a dragon, so I really have no flippin' idea what the hell she would be like or what she would like. With that, I went through, grabbed the clothes she had taken off that I'd given her, including the poncho liner, folded them, rolled them, and went back inside my bag. I made sure everything was there, and I double-checked my gear. Thankfully, everything was here. I looked out the window. A very strange type of glass. It wasn't exactly perfect, but it wasn't totally warped either. You would think like medieval glass that had all sorts of imperfections, but this, no. This was really good. Whoever had built this knew what they were doing, just seemingly didn't have the right materials. I felt my hand around the edge of the glass, and I realized that they had figured out some sort of putty in wood. This is odd. So it's not complete Eastern construction. I looked out amongst the buildings outside. I realized that I was much higher than most of the other buildings, which meant that I was in the VIP suite. Well, that's pretty sweet, isn't it? I looked out, and sure enough, it wasn't just the standard tiles that you would expect, but a mixture of different type of architecture, seemingly haphazardly set up. There was clear streets, and the beginnings of commerce were beginning, with people bringing their carts back and forth. But not just people hauling carts, no. They had animals pulling their carts, but I looked over, and sure enough, they had small machines as well. This was odd. What are they? What the hell? I'm definitely in another world because there is a strange mix of Eastern, Western, and technology levels here. I don't know what the hell's going on, but this ain't right. With that, I looked over as Renizia began to move in her bed. She began to start kicking her covers off almost violently as the sun began to touch the bed itself. She looked cute, but whatever. While she slept, I figured I would do my personal hygiene. I didn't want to run my electric razor because Lord only knows how long the battery's going to hold out. So I figured I'd at least go to the mirror and use my knife to at least trim myself up a little bit. Making sure the knife was good, I pulled out a steel and got it lined up. But as I went to look in the mirror, I received one hell of a shock. I was almost 50. How in the front flipping fucker nuts did I look like I'm 16 years old again? I mean, I know the guys in my family always look young for their age, but this is insane. How in the shit? I reached out, I touched the mirror itself, it was real, I touched my face, I saw the reflection. What the hell is going on? I immediately ripped up my shirt as fast as I could. My scars are gone. Off my head? No, wait, no freaking way. I reached down immediately and I pulled up my pants. Sure enough, that scar is gone too. What the shit? I began to freak out a little bit. I began to check myself over and over. Sure enough, my body was the way it was back then. That's weird. Even if I de-aged, how can I rejuvenate and regenerate back to ow, my brain hurts. Oh. I suddenly moved away as I saw Renizia just barely start to come into being awake. Her consciousness just starting to rile herself up as she began to get up out of the bed itself. She fought against that kimono, at least the one layer she was in, for a little while. It's like, well, wait a minute. If I'm looking this young, is she older? What the... Okay, we didn't get a chance to talk much last night. But if I look like this, and the things are healed, and let me think about this logically. Ow! Okay, my brain hurts again. Okay, I'll come back to that. And around that time, we could hear shuffling outside the door. The door itself slid open with a snap. I swear these people don't know how to knock. They didn't even announce themselves. It was simply the maids themselves. They brought in some food for us, something to drink, and immediately went over to the bed to see if they would change the sheets. They pulled the blanket over top and then looked down and were confused. They looked at me and grinned, and I went, "What?" They looked at her, and she looked confused at them as well. And it hit me again like a baseball bat between the eyes, and I simply walked over, put my hand around Risha's shoulder, and then went to the first maid and whispered in her ear, "You really think I'm gonna fuck someone this young?" She looked at me sideways, as if this was a commonplace thing. I seriously wanted to smack someone upside the head for that one. But it is what it is. I'm not in my own world, so my own rules don't really apply. But, hey, it is what it is. With that, as they were changing everything, we sat down and ate. I made sure my weapons stayed very close to me, not telling anybody what else was in those duffel bags, though. I worked my way across the meal, and Renizia was also hungry as well. I was still starving. I didn't expect that my body would burn through that many calories, but I just chowed down everything. I had to ask for another whole goblet of water as I kept chugging it down more and more and more, eventually having to ask where I could go take a piss as well. Thankfully, even though they're medieval, at least they got basic facilities. Well, if you call that basic facility, it's all gravity fed. Somehow, they got some sort of aqueduct somewhere because it was constant running water, which was really smart actually. Whoever had come up with this system was, again, pretty smart. I made sure I knew which one I could drink and which one I could piss in. Very, very important on that, because wherever this was going, I'm sure someone else was going to use it. Thankfully, it was very well noted on which one was which. And after relieving myself, I went back, checked all my gear again, and then got ready to go. I figured we weren't going to be in this area for very long, and I was right. By the time I was done lacing up my boots, the door again slammed open. "Seriously, people, knock!" is all I screamed. They looked at me sideways, but the guards walked in, and then one who seemed to have an air of, well, for lack of a better term, arrogance, walked in. "The king demands your presence. Follow me." With that, I started to put my gear on. "You may leave your items here." "Yeah, right." I simply looked at him and continued to put my stuff on. He looked confused. "I don't trust you guys." "Would you trust anybody if you went to some place you don't know who they are? You have no reference?" The one who was arrogant suddenly thought for a moment, and at least he was honest. "No, I don't believe I would." Good, I made my point. With that, my rucksack and everything else went on. I grabbed one of the duffel bags, and before I could say anything, Renizia grabbed the other one, although this one she strained with because it was the heavier of the two, at least for a moment. Hoisting it over her shoulder, she tried to dodge one of her wings as she slung it across. I told her she didn't have to, that I would carry it, but she insisted. Eventually, we walked back to their supposed throne room. With that, as I walked in, many of everyone there, with the exception of some guards, were watching me with a little bit of contempt, but also were whispering. Thankfully, to whatever they did with their bullshit magic, I could understand what they were saying for the most part. They were whispering, "Are you sure it's him? He looks strange. What is he wearing? What is that? Why does he have that thing? He already has a slave." That last one made me perk up. What? With that, I was brought into the center. I had several, I'm guessing, nobles or royalty or whatever the hell you want to call them on either side. In front of me was a semi-level platform, maybe about 1.5 feet up, with 2 chairs. As the king and queen entered, everyone dropped to their knees, both knees, and then lowered their heads. I stood there. Oh, I'm not playing that game. You may want to try something, but I gripped my pistol grip as tight as I could, putting my thumb right on the selector lever and waiting for one of these guards to be getting a little froggy and decide to jump. The king simply raised his hand and ordered everyone to stand, and they did. With that, I looked at him and I looked at his wife. His wife was still as I left her. A beauty, a true beauty, but was also looking at me as though I was a steak. As like a piece of top sirloin that she wanted to chew on. She had a desire in her eyes which was honestly a bit scary. But she also started feeling her own skin as she looked at me. Boy, this woman was creepy. The king spoke up. It is customary here for you to get on your knees whenever royalty enters the room. Do you not have this same sort of custom where you come from? Nope, I stated, and nothing else left my lips. Well, I would expect that next time. Oh, so next time I won't heal your wife and make her the hotsy-totsy she actually is? Hotsy-totsy? Never mind. It's a reference to how pretty she is. With that, she actually blushed a little bit. The king did see this and thought I was hitting on his wife. He got a little angry, so I decided to dissuade him. So what did you need to talk to me about? It's quite simple, actually. Do you know how rare a healer actually is, especially one with your type of power? No idea. Magic doesn't exist where I come from. That's why we have technology, which is where I tapped the end of my rifle. Ah, I see. Well, that does not explain why you were so good at what you did, and you worked a miracle on the queen. An absolute miracle. And I did not know that you could do what you did. Do you know how you did this? Yeah, it's called biology. I don't understand what the question is. Do you not understand anything beyond what you can see? Do you not understand there's small parts in your body that make up the rest of you? Do you know what cells are? He looked confused and then looked over to someone that might have been a maester or something like that. And he just kind of looked confused. No, we are unaware of this. Perhaps you could instruct us. Possibly. But I'm sure that's not the only reason I'm here. No, I wish to present you to everyone and let you know that you will be part of the royal court. And it is a great honor for you to serve under me. And you will report directly to me, and you will serve the royal family, and I'm sure you will, with distinction from here on out. I tried my best to make sure I didn't look like I felt inside as my blood began to boil. As I was reaching a fever pitch, I felt a small hand reach up and grab mine. Renisa was looking up to me, and she simply shook her head no. This calmed me down just enough. So, before that, in front of all, I wanted to show your work. I wanted to present my beauty of a wife, that she is now back to the way she was, and I cannot be more grateful for this. Not only that, she will be able to remain in her position as queen even though she was tapping on death's door just the other day. None of our healers knew how to fix her. They did not how to do whatever it is you did, and I look forward to learning how. Why, are you a healer too? Oh no, we have so few of them. He waved his hand over to the side. The one I thought was a maester apparently was a healer. He was a fairly old man. I would wager late 50s, early 60s. We have healers, as this great healer beside me. He is the only reason my wife survived long enough for you to do what you did with your healing magic. Good to know. I waved over to him, and I motioned with my 2 fingers for him to come towards me. Looking at the king for a moment, the king simply motioned to him to walk over to me. When he finally reached me, I looked him square in the eye, stuck my hand out as though I was going to shake his hand. He looked at me strange, as they didn't understand this gesture, and then he reached out and took my hand. I squeezed his hand, said, "Good to meet you," and I shook it once. And in that moment, once I had physical contact, I looked into his body. And just as I'd done before, I did an entire sweep of him, cell by cell, neuron by neuron, all the way through his nervous system, digestive tract, even his own heart. And I found out that he might be a healer, but he's been taking very poor care of himself. His liver was shot. And what I mean shot, I mean totally shot to shit. I couldn't believe the amount of damage that his drinking had caused. I figured, you know what? If this is going to be the grand healer, somebody's got to cover if I'm not here. If he's that good, and I hope he is, I wonder, should I do what I think I'm doing? With that, I looked him in the eye and said, "Tell me something. Would you swear here and now to always heal the sick, no matter what, as long as it is not at complete and total risk of your life? If you are about to die from exhaustion, that is your limit. Do you swear to heal all those around you?" He looked at me and grinned, raising his shoulders back. I could tell it hurt him a little bit. I know because I saw the arthritis in his back. He simply stated, "I swear. I have always sworn that. I'm a healer like you. You're not a healer like me. But a healer needs to take care of himself. Now hold still, this might sting." "What?" And with that, I dove back into his body and began to fix all the cirrhosis that was in his liver and all the arthritis that was throughout his bones. I swear this guy was very, very jacked up. There were several other viruses bouncing around his system that were playing hell with it. Most of them weren't totally contagious or would put him down for the count, but they wouldn't make him feel good. So I decided to zap them too, which only took, honestly, a few seconds. I was really getting the hang of this after all. Within a few moments, I had totally obliterated the cirrhosis in his liver. I had also revamped a few of his muscles and also redone his joints. And by the way, goodbye arthritis. With that, he was surprised. He went to raise himself up, this time pushing his shoulders back as far as possible. I could hear the cracking coming from his bones as he stood up and straightened out, seemingly for the first time, straightening his neck. He pulled his hood back, and everyone was amazed. He had just de-aged, rejuvenated, by about 20 years. I didn't bring him all the way back, because last time I did that was with the Queen, and it damn near killed me. So I wasn't going to do that much. I simply released my hand, turned to the king, and said, "Now you got 2 good healers." With that, the king's smile reached from one ear to the other. You couldn't wipe that off if you tried. And with that, the entire crowd was amazed. I knew I had to showboat just a little bit to show them what I was capable of. Honestly, at this point, I didn't know what I was capable of. I'm pretty sure that was the limit at that point anyway. But I had to just make a point. They were showing us all sorts of kindness, and I didn't even know where the hell the rest of the group was. With that, the king allowed the healer to come back. He examined the healer a little bit, and they had a small conversation. The king, not nearly as old as anyone else would think, was just amazed by this. Can't say I'd blame him. The first time anybody's thought of rejuvenation. Everybody thinks of regeneration, but nobody thinks about being, well, what a true healer can be for once. At least, not outside something a little more etchy. At that point, the king simply waved for his guards. "Bring them in." And with that, I saw him bring several women in. These women were in rags and in chains, and none of them, except for one, was human. My eyes widened as I realized what I was looking at. The non-human females that had been brought through the portal. Along with that, at the tail end, one of the young males who was not human, it looked like he got the shit kicked out of him all night. They were all brought in with their heads down. When they looked at me, even slightly, one of the guards would shove their head down and tell them no looking, heads down. They pulled them in. I was just stunned with that. The only thing that kept me from totally freezing up was two hands squeezing my arm to the point where I thought she was going to break the ligaments, go in and snap the bone. Renesia was in shock as well. The look on her face of holy shit. The king and queen simply looked at each other and smiled. And the king sat back and the queen stood up. "This is your reward for doing such a great job on me and saving my life and bringing me all the way back to this," as she shoved her hands across her skin all the way down to her bountiful chest. She then swayed down towards her hips just to show that she was the sexy woman that she was before. "Along with that, but making sure that I will be around to see my children and help run the kingdom. And you have done a miracle on our healer as well. And we know you will do future miracles to us. We present you a gift." She had her arms raised across all of them. They all kept their heads down. I could see the young boy slowly raising his one open eye up towards me, and he had a look of sheer terror. He also had a look of someone who had been broken. Not fully, but enough. I looked across each of them, one by one. The queen simply stated, "You may choose." With that, I could hear the entire crowd around me mumbling, wondering which one, actually placing bets on which one I would choose. I simply looked at each of them and saw that they had been beaten down in some way. I couldn't see too much blood outside of where the shackles were, around their ankles, around their wrists, and what in the ever-loving... Did they have collars on? As I looked close, realized that yes, they did. They did have a type of collar, but it had some sort of strange jewels on it. Why would they enjewel a collar? Oh, son of a bitch. I can't believe I didn't think of it sooner. These were power dampening collars. Everybody that came through has an ability. Renesia, of all things, has a type of electrical charge to her, which is odd, but I think maybe I can charge a cell phone or something with it. But it's not just that. It has something to do with electrical currents. But the thing is, electrical currents can be altered in any way, including just straight heat. Although it kind of did turn her into a dragon, well, Pikachu, for lack of a better term. Which I could see that she was starting to charge up. She didn't really have control over it, I could tell. She was straining to get it to go. But I looked over at each one and I raised my hand and put it on her head. She looked at me quickly, as though she was confused. I simply raised my other hand, finger to my lips, and went, "Shh." I then pulled her close so that she wasn't going to see. The queen reiterated, "Please, choose," with that big grin she had on her face. I swear, because I had a Renesia right next to me, they thought I had a thing for beastkin or something. So I simply looked her in the eye and said, "Yes." "What?" "Yes." "No, choose." "Yes." "You need to choose one." "Yes." "Are you going to choose one?" "Yes." And she was confused. She dropped her hand. She looked over to her husband, completely confused. The king actually stood up, which made everybody shudder because the king was not supposed to stand. He simply stood up so he could see over the slaves' heads and said, "What do you mean, yes?" I waved my arm from one side to the other with my palm open, as though I was pointing at every single one of them, and I said, "Yes." That was when the king understood. The queen figured it out about 2 seconds later from the look on her face. Her jaw just about dropped, and so does his. They didn't think that I would choose all of them. But there it was. They offered them to me. So I said yes. With that, they argued for just a few moments. But then they realized that my capabilities were far too valuable to be thrown away. With that, they immediately started to bring the slaves over, again drawing them out in that long line with the shackles and the cuffs and that fucking collar. It was everything I could do not to just end everyone in this room. I was so mad. But when I looked down to Renesia, she gave me the most innocent and gleeful smile I've ever seen. Ever. And with that, they were all brought back to the same large room that I had been in the night before. Good thing too, because this pack was getting heavy, and I needed to sit down. As we all got in there, I immediately started dropping my bags off to the side. Renesia started looking at me strange. Like, what was I gonna do? As we went inside, another man walked in. He had a strange stone something. I don't know how else to say it, except it was carved stone. He simply stated, "I need to rub my hand on it." "What?" "Your blood. Rub your blood on this, your hand." It's like, okay. So I pulled out my knife, getting ready to slice it. No. The stone does it. Okay. And I just wiped my hand on the front of it, where it was nice and smooth. Sure enough, it just kind of sucked the blood out of my capillaries. I looked down, I'm like, okay, there's no laceration. Why is there blood all over the front of my hand? And with that, you could see that each of the collars began to glow very brightly. And this seemed to cause them a lot of pain. I reached over, grabbed the stone, and yanked it out of his hand. He simply stated, "Oh, this means that they are now yours to command. You may do whatever you choose, but they are of your responsibility. If they do something wrong, they are of your responsibility." I get it. Kind of like pets. I get it. Now get! What? I said get! And with that, he got the idea and backed out again. Seriously, what is with the backing out and the shuffling? I still don't understand that. As he got out, I actually went to the door myself and slid it shut and slammed it shut. This time, I looked at Renesia and said, "Anybody else just comes through that door without knocking, please zap them, because this is getting annoying." I looked over to each of them, and they could see that I was pissed. They seemed to shudder as I walked towards them. All 8 of them. What in the shit? I wondered what the hell I could do with this rock I was holding. I didn't know. There was no owner's manual. I looked it around and there was no inscription or anything. I simply thought for a moment, it'd be nice if I can get rid of those cuffs. And the cuffs began to open by themselves and simply dropped to the ground. I thought shackles too. The shackles opened and dropped to the ground. They all looked at each other, began to grab their wrists and their ankles, checking for each other, and then began to hug each other to see if they were okay. It's like, alright, now the fun part. Get those goddamn collars off. And without that the colors began to glow, but this time, instead of a strange blue, they went to red and then popped off and fell to the ground with a thud on each one. With that, they all reached up, grabbed their necks, and realized what I had just done. I then went to the stone and threw it on the floor, breaking it into pieces. With that, the stones immediately stopped glowing. Whatever they had magic on these was done. Wasn't playing this fucking game. With that, I looked to each of them and said, okay, I need y'all to introduce yourselves because I can't just call you hey you. But for right now, before you go absolutely nuts and either try to run out of here and do some crazy shit, we need to talk. Understood? They all seemed to nod, and I motioned for them to sit down. Thankfully, there was some extra food, and I brought it over, and they all dug into it. Holy crap. Did you guys even get fed? They all looked, and many of them shook their heads. Others nodded their heads. I didn't know if that was yes or no, because Lord knows, even on my old planet, that used to be different. Just say yes or no, because nodding or shaking doesn't tell me. In between bites, they were, no, not at all. Wonderful. Well, me and the king are gonna have a talk later. As I thought about that, I looked them all, and they looked like shit. I immediately walked to the door, opened it just a little bit, and of course there was a guard. Yeah. Water, some pans to clean up, soap if you got it, and we need fresh clothes. The guard kind of looked at me strange. He looked inside, and I got in his way. He couldn't see. All he could see was me. I leaned forward. Now! And with that, he began to move. Once he left, I closed the door, turned around, and looked at those right now chewing on the rest of the food, some of them fighting over some of the morsels. It's like, great, this is my reward? What the